And so, are you ready to continue to explore the practice of compassionate communication? Something that is so valuable in our lives. Relationships can be a great source of joy and blessings in our lives. And they also can be a source of deep heartache and disappointment. Our mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, children, partners, and friends all are our greatest teachers. And within the dynamics and interactions of a relationship with another person, we have the opportunity to share our lives from our open hearts and from our divine nature. Or we have the choice to allow the playbook of our woundedness, which allows our personality self to be in the driver's seat, allowing our personality selves to call all the shots in our interactions. And psychologists, Linda and Charlie Bloom, in an article that they penned for Psychology Today, share that great relationships require hard work. I don't think that is anything revelatory to any of you who are here. And I'd like to share something that they spoke about, and they compare being present and practicing the needed work to establish a healthy relationship. They compared that to the launching of a spacecraft. So Charlie Curlew, I know you will like this. So they state, when NASA launches a spacecraft, it uses about 90% of its fuel breaking free of the Earth's atmosphere. And after it clears the pull of this gravitational force, considerably less fuel is required, allowing it to travel great distances while expending far less energy. These principles also apply to relationships. The early stages are where the real work begins. That work is about committed listening, letting go of control, practicing vulnerability, overcoming resistance to change, being honest, even in the face of fear, and focusing on your own work rather than trying to change your partner, loved one, or dear friend. Like mastering any other new skill, it takes a lot to hang in there and muddle through the demanding times. The required effort is often great, and the challenge can be daunting, leading many to conclude that it is not worth it, or that they don't have the stamina or the time, and therefore don't believe that they can persevere and to do that necessary work. And so I really would like to focus in on that paragraph one of the most important paragraphs of what I just read. The work about committed listening, letting go of control, practicing vulnerability, overcoming resistance to change, being honest, even in the face of fear, and focusing on your own work on your own work. How often are we busy trying to change everybody else rather than trying to change your partner, loved one, or dear friend? And it takes mastering. Like any new skill, it takes practice. And Robert Brummett, author of Living Originally, would agree. That's why he calls the 10 spiritual lessons practices, because they require our devotion and our discipline. And so compassionate communication is no different. And this paragraph that I read, written by Linda and Charlie, speak about all of the aspects that are included in compassionate communication, which I began to speak about last Sunday. And so we're going to continue to explore that. Now, with the practice of compassionate communication, there are two overarching principles of it. And the first one is right speech, and the second one is deep listening. And for right speech, it is based on a Buddhist practice that before we communicate, and speaking here again means whether we are speaking in the spoken word or if we are creating text, whether it's a text message, a Facebook post, a letter, a card, so on and so on. So right speech is about all forms of communication. And to practice right speech, before we speak or write, we ask ourselves 3 important questions. 1, is it true? 2, is it kind? And 3, is it necessary? And last week I went into, is it true? And this week we are going to explore, is it kind? Is it necessary? And then we're going to end with, what is deep listening? So before we go on to, is it kind and is it necessary? I just want to do a quick review of, is it true? And I thought this little excerpt from an article, Mindful Speech, from the Buddha Grove, was a good summary to just refresh our minds. Is it true? While we rarely speak with the intention to tell outright lies, that doesn't make our words true. We can perpetuate rumors, spread gossip, exaggerate in ways that cater to our egos, personal biases, stories, and agendas. Or we can simply talk in ways that are authentic to who we are, the divine essence of who we are, and what we want to communicate, what from our divine nature we want to communicate, not from our ego. And when speaking, ask yourself, is it true? And if not, why am I saying it? What am I really trying to communicate by stretching the truth? And another one I would add to that paragraph is there any other way of seeing this situation than what I am holding in my perception? And so now that takes us to the next question that we contemplate. My mouse is sensitive, my tapping is sensitive. So here we go. Is it kind? And here by kindness, we're not just talking about, etiquette of politeness. It is something that emanates from our heart. So kindness begins within the heart's intention to be genuine, authentic, caring, and empathetic. And it is something we breathe into. It is something we must desire in our open-heartedness and not just coming from our intellect. So to really deepen asking that question, is it kind? There are some other questions that could help you Godpost is a good one, or guidepost, and really contemplating, is it kind? When I speak, am I showing empathy? Am I considering the feelings of another? Am I saying something that will lift the mood or lift the spirits of those in the room or in my vicinity? And most importantly, which words are the most compassionate to use? And we know that we are missing the mark in kindness, in this right speech practice of, is it kind? When we are disingenuous, disingenuous in our optimism, in our positivity, rah, rah, but it's not really connected to our hearts and how we're speaking. It's kind of that fake facade, so to speak, because we think it's the right thing to do, but yet it's not really what's alive in our hearts. Or when we give empty flattery or compliments to be liked, or kind of like nudge our way to get in our agenda. And it's not about political correctness or politeness. Again, it is that intention to be centered in our heart and to be the presence, to live from that compassionate and empathetic presence, which is our divine nature. Now, sometimes we can get confused, especially in spiritual circles, spiritual communities, and we think la-di-da-da, I never get to speak a hurt, I can't hurt somebody, so we ignore it, or we let it simmer, and then we go up one side of someone and down the other. So this is not about kind, doesn't mean that we don't get to speak what's most alive. But if we really true and allow the speaking to come from our authentic self, we can communicate it in a way that is most compassionate. We can say what we need to say. Just a simple example, let's say parent and child, let's say the kitchen is a mess and there's dishes all over and the cupboards are open and the garbage is overflowing and so on and so on. Not that I've never experienced that raising my children. And so we have a choice, right? So, maybe having things in order and valuing your sacred space is something that's important to show reverence, not just for ourselves, but, for the sanctuary of our homes. And so that could be said this way. You know how many times I told you to clean those damn dishes in the sink? What's wrong with you? You're just sloppy. You don't care about anything. You don't value this house. So on and so on. And you could fill in the blanks. Or we can take a deep breath, be connected to our hearts, let go of our agendas and speak. I really value taking care of our house. And when things are in order, I can concentrate more clearly. Can you please, clean the dishes? Okay, and sometimes we may have to say that once or twice, or even ask, what is a plan that we can make together? Sometimes when we are upset, we just kind of can vomit over other people instead of, and then we become the victims instead of holding the space of the truth of me, the truth of you, letting go of the stories, and then not attacking somebody's character. Because when we're doing that, there is no way we are in our hearts. Now we move to the third question of right speech. And that is the question, Is it necessary? And here, the intention of asking this question before I speak comes from my authentic desire to share with another. It is about my concern over another's well-being. And you can see that the intentions are kind of similar, and they kind of are like a domino effect of one another. And so guideposts to know, to help us, expand what it means, is it necessary, is sometimes just saying, is it necessary to speak at all? Sometimes silence is the best thing. And am I speaking to convey information, or and deepen the relationship? So, for example, is it necessary to speak at all? My mother has been a smoker for many years. And when I come from my fearful place, and I haven't done this in many, 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 many years, but I used to feel the fear of her heavy smoking. And I would give her the lecture about her smoking. And more recently, she suffers from some irritable bowel and gastritis. And so I noticed a pattern that, if there's a holiday or something, she will have a flare up and she will talk about her symptoms. So I used to say, did you notice if, X, Y, or Z foods maybe are contributing to that? And she doesn't believe in nutrition. It's just take the medicine and so on and so on. And then I would find myself getting frustrated. And then it was like, you know what? That is not something she believes in. And the only thing right now is for me to be a space of compassion, because God only knows I ingest things sometimes that are not good for me as well. So I go back to, is my desire about connecting, or does it become now me trying to convince her to do something? So lots of times when she says those things about her stomach, after I've seen what she has eaten, I just take a deep breath and I just send her some love. And I can honestly say I have that deep compassion. And empathy is that space where we can say, me too. When we have overindulged in whatever it is in our lives, and we pay the consequences. So how do we know if we are missing the mark? What are the signs that when we're not in alignment with, is it necessary? Again, we see some of these things repeating. Is my communicating about trying to impress or influence another? Like trying to get somebody to stop smoking? Is it about defending or justifying myself in some way? Is it about persuading or convincing someone of my rightness and his, her, their wrongness? Is it a way for me to boost my ego, relieve my own anxiety instead of looking at it myself? Or am I trying to control a situation? Because my friends, if we really look at our speech, going back to that thing again about lecturing, about smoking, everything, what is really under it is about my desire for my mother to thrive and to feel well. And that comes from a space of love. But instead of communicating that, we sometimes lecture and we attack people with our judgments. So we talked a lot about the aspects of right speech, about how we center ourselves before we say something in spoken word or pen something in or type something. And also a very vital part of compassionate communication is listening. And there is a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing means that I may hear the audible sounds or something, but there is no inner processing or understanding or taking that in. So if somebody would start speaking Chinese in front of me, I may hear the sounds, but I wouldn't have that deep understanding. And so Robert Brummett shares that there are 4 degrees of listening. And so I'd like to share these with you. And I think you can relate to this. And so the first degree is, I hear the words of another person, but I am totally preoccupied. I am checked out somewhere else. I am preoccupied with my own thoughts and judgments, or what I have to do, don't do. I am pretending I am listening. I'll say the occasional or whatever, but I'm more interested in something else, or I'm more interested in trying to formulate my response or my defense, especially if somebody says something we disagree with. We're not really present. We're just like, okay, building our defense. What do I have to say? What do I have to say next? So that is the first level, or first degree of listening. Then we go a little bit deeper, which is the second degree of listening. And here in this space, I am more open to what the speaker has to say. And I may even enjoy what he or she or they is saying, but everything I hear is received only at the level of my intellect. I take it in. What are the rules? What's the reasoning? What's the rationale? What do I know? And the willingness to learn begins, but it's the little desire on our parts to be deeply touched or changed. And this is our cultural norm, where we come from. What is our bottom line? What is the training we received? Well, you know, when I learned in marketing this, or I learned in my nutrition class this, and we're so interested in about the point of view that we learned, or you know, when we like to have that intellectual debate, but there's really no desire to take in what's being said, thinking that there are other possibilities other than your view, your intellectual view of what is being said. We can see this very often. Actually, the first one, and even into the second one, you know, when we watch a debate, no matter what the question is, sometimes you're like, where the heck did they come up with that answer? It could be like, you know, what's your plan for creating new jobs? And then they talk about, it's kind of related, but they talk about what they did, you know, when they were a teenager, what job they have. And then, you know, the time is up and they never answered the question of, you know, what they're going to do right here and now, or they talk about something totally different because they have their own agenda and they're not allowing to be touched by what's going on in the world, about the suffering or anything to be touched or changed, because they see it all from an intellectual, what's best for my political party? That's the intellectual conversation. And there's no taking it in and being willing to be changed by what's going on. And so then we look at together the third degree of listening. And the intention here is a deep desire to be willing to be changed from the inside out. That's when we move from that translational spirituality, you know, I'm going to practice the spirituality to manifest what I want. But that transformative spirituality is being willing to be changed from the inside out, to awaken to our true self. And so we're in this third degree of listening. This is where our desires start to emanate. I'm willing to keep my heart open and understand what you are saying in a very deep way. I'm willing to enter into true dialogue back and forth, not just worried about what I'm going to say next with another person, so that we both can be benefit and enriched in this interaction. And third degree here in this kind of listening is necessary for spiritual direction, life coach, counseling, for any of that even take place, to move from the words in this spiritual text, or I can spout it's only love or fear, but then in my behavior, I'm totally off the mark. Okay, and then we move to the deepest. And when I read this, my heart just leaps. So the fourth degree is where we are, what they call presencing. Remember, I talked about be the presence. And sometimes heart math talks about this, when we can be connected in our unified heart mind after doing deep breathing, having the intention to be open, to be the presence of what is, just allowing, you know, when we build on all these practices, I'm aware of what's happening in my thoughts, in my feelings, and in my emotions. Second practice, I embrace and accept all that is here to open me up to my highest good. I am filled with universal benevolence. I am willing to let go and forgive all agendas, so on and so on. So as we, in this fourth degree, we have a consciousness of open heart, mind, and soul. And both the speaker and the listener enter into a field of listening. We know of the inner guidance of spirit, of the wise one within is present, and it is presencing, and you feel that it's palpable. And you allow that to flow back and forth and being in that field. And as you can imagine, this is rare because it can be very difficult. And why could it be very difficult? Because it is hard to remain open, right? To every facet of ourselves, to be vulnerable to another, to be willing to be changed at depth, and have all of our defense mechanism just drop by the wayside. It is difficult for us to face our greatest fear and feel our deepest pain. But when we can be present to it all, knowing that holy field of presence is alive within us and trusting it, that's the piece, having faith in it. It is letting go. It is knowing that it exists, not just in the book that I study, but I'm going to be willing. Presence right here and now. And although it is the most difficult, my friends, it can lead to the most utmost profound joy of your being. It is when you know not just the definition, we can repeat, we're one, we're connected in body, mind, and in spirit, but you sense it, you know it with every fiber of your being. And so let us take a deep breath as we come to a close. Compassionate communication is so vital in our lives. And the roots, it is vital to the roots of a lasting relationship. Being mindful, loving or right speech, and deep listening. And yes, just like the beginning articles talked about the launching of a spacecraft, which seems very complex and takes a lot of energy. We know that anything we devote our time to, our patience to, instead of saying, I'm too busy, I don't have time for this practice, so on and so on, our relationships will remain the same. It will remain the same from the place that we live from, that we breathe from. And so from whatever small step you can take today, tomorrow, of being aware of your listening, how you're listening. Starting off with maybe saying, okay, I'm gonna look at and say, is it true? And then next week I'm gonna add, is it kind? And maybe the next week I'm gonna add, is it necessary? The key here is just having the willingness not only for you to transform your life, but to have the world of others to be impacted by beauty. And when we can do that, that is when we experience heaven on earth. And so I close with a poem entitled, "Listen to Me." When I ask you to listen to me and you start giving me advice, you have not done what I've asked. When I ask you to listen to me and you begin to tell me why I shouldn't feel that way, you are trampling on my feelings. And when I ask you to listen to me and you feel you have to do something to solve my problem, you have failed me. Strange as that may seem, listen. All I ask of you is to listen. Don't talk or do, just be still. And when you do something that I need to do for myself, you contribute to my fear and the belief in my own inadequacy. But when you accept how I am feeling, no matter how irrational, I can stop trying to convince you and get about this business of understanding what's beneath my feelings. Irrational feelings make sense when we understand what's behind them, deep in our heart and soul. So please listen and just hear me. And if you want to talk, wait a minute for your turn, and I will listen to you. Blessings of light and joy and fruitful relationships, my friend.